Welcome to the DMF. I am your host, Justin Yachts, and today my guest is Jessica Porter. She is an actor, a hypnotherapist, a comedian, and a writer. And this is only part one. Enjoy. Okay, today I have a special guest with me. I have Jessica Porter. She is a hypnotherapist as well as an actor. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Mhm.
The first question is because you were a young actor. You did acting at a young age. Was there somebody that instilled that love of the arts in you?
No, there wasn't an individual in my life. I think I was just a child of the 70s who watched
Mm.
way too much TV. And, my parents were divorced when I was really young, and one of the things my dad did was take us to the movies. So, plus my father, let me rewind. My father is a courtroom lawyer, and my mother is a teacher, and both of those things are performing arts. And so I think I just have the gene, or
Yeah.
gene, but I think logging many, many hours in front of a TV made it, uh, I mean, it's not like every kid who does that becomes an actor, but it was like my portal to this imaginary world, and that world seemed really exciting and interesting. And so I loved getting on stage. I loved pretending to be other people. I loved the freedom of it. I even went to a movie the other day. I love seeing movies in movie theaters these days, and I've been
Same
doing it
here.
ever since the vaccine came out. And it's a really good movie theater. And as you know, although I think some theaters do it better than others, you enter and you have to go down this long, dark passage before you get to the screen. And even that going down the dark passage is like the hypnotic induction. It's like, welcome, you are actually changing worlds right now. And we're going to give you a little moment, like 5 seconds to release your psyche, the stuff of your life, your daily burdens, so you can come and engage in this experience. And I've always just loved that, whether it was seeing it or doing it.
Interesting. Interesting. You mentioned the movie theaters, and in New York City, they have like the AMC Prime, and there's like a little like thing where it's showing like an advertisement before you even go into the theater of the movie. So it's
Huh.
kind of so they're getting more and more, adding more and more inductions, I think, as
Yes,
you go in. It's not even
yeah.
just that now it's like, the
No, it's
lights and
true. It's all a process. And every movie theater sort of does it well or not. Some movie theaters are kind of crappy and it's just like slapdash. But then
yeah.
some movie theaters really, there's a new one where I live that just opened about 2 months ago. And it's quite a dramatic, like these escalators up and, you're in this
Oh wow.
huge space and then it takes you through the tunnel and then it's
Yeah.
really well done.
It's like taking you out of your world, which I think
Yeah.
more and more with technology and phones, people need to be induced, because the first thing they do is sit there and play with the phone. And it's like, you gotta knock them out of that so that you can almost
Totally.
lure them into the induction. Because if they're, I think this is probably why there are previews, it's another form of induction to get you ready for the movie. If you're staring at the phone and stuff,
Mhm,
the
mhm.
movie, it can't really get you into that, because you're almost, one part of you is here, one part of you is there.
Right. Well, and the phone itself is its own trance, but it's kind of like a shitty fractured trance. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The fact that like I'm going to do this and flip to that, and whereas because in a movie theater, and I felt it the first time I went back, I was like, oh my God, movie theaters! Like, and it, I can imagine someone who grows up going to church. You
Yeah.
log every week of your life, you go to this place as a child, and whether you like it or not, it itself is this lofty, like vaulted ceiling and, stained glass and music. It's very hypnotic, church and or synagogue or wherever. And you go there, whether you like it or not, it's gotten into your bones. And then as an adult, entering a church would, again, whether you like it or not, just bring about and touch on and trigger all of those feelings. And I find that with a movie theater. Like I go into a movie theater, a part of me lets go, a part of me is given permission to dream, given permission to just like open up a fantasy realm. And it's really, really difficult to do on a screen, even in your own home, because your phone's right there and your partner's right there. And you have work in your office or whatever it is, but to actually bring your body to the place, turn off the phone. And I put mine on airplane mode or I turn it off and just am completely released to that experience. It's fantastic.
That's exactly how I look at a movie theater. It is almost like going to a church. The
Mm.
problem is not everybody else shares that same
Yeah.
feeling now.
Yeah. And
And they're, you could see at the side of your, so there I have to just like watch the movie like this with like my head,
Yeah.
hand covering the peripheral vision,
Right.
because it's like, how do I, like, I think that's part of what we've gotten away from. It's not, I don't know if it's a loss of respect for just humanity in general that has happened with more and more ways, because we just are like, oh, this is my house too, so I'm just gonna sit here,
Right.
I'm just gonna look at my phone, who cares? And I think that is how, I don't think they're doing it like maliciously, but I do think they're just like, well, what's the big deal? And I think
Well, and I think
that's,
like fractured is such a great word. Like the media landscape is fractured. The internet has fractured these containers that we used to have. And the phone itself makes us so narcissistic. Like if I were to hand you my phone and you handed me yours, we would see entirely different worlds.
yeah.
I mean, there may be like a 10% crossover. Maybe you read the New York Times too, but that's it. Like I
Yeah.
have Candy Crush and pictures of my nieces and you know what I mean? Like just an entirely different world. So what this reflects back to me is that I am the world. Like I'm not forced to sit through anyone else's representation of anything. I am constantly choosing. Back in the day when I was growing up, like there were 3 or 4 channels. So you watched Walter Cronkite or you watched, Tom Brokaw or whatever it was. And you had to tolerate the edges of the discourse that you didn't agree with. You had to tolerate a lack of choices. And there was also, I don't mean to be like the old person,
No, but it's true. But it's
well,
true.
yeah, I mean, what it did to your consciousness was it both, I mean, when you're sitting there watching Walter Cronkite and you know that 30 million other people are doing it at the same time, there's a collective feeling that we're losing. And even just recently, the death of the Queen, that was one of the most collective experiences we've had in a long time since the pandemic. The pandemic was also the pandemic. Do you remember when the pandemic began and it was like, oh, we're going to shut shit down. Oh my God, we're really shutting down. I mean, the whole world is shutting down. Like you're not leaving your house. It took about 5 or 6 days. And it was the greatest hypnotic induction of my life. It was, I don't mean great, fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
most profound. And it
Yeah.
was global. And it was like, whoa, the game just changed on a dime. And your critical faculty, because I talk about this in the Hypnosis for Actors, like the thing that characterizes hypnosis is that it's a message that gets past this sort of ego judgment, sense of self or critical faculty, just a defense mechanism that we have mentally. So the pandemic just bashed the critical faculty to hell. And because none of us had ever been in a pandemic, it was
Yeah.
like nuclear bomb went off. And so these collective experiences were really, Seinfeld on a Thursday night at 9:00 was a national collective experience.
Yeah.
Friends was a national collective experience. We don't even have that anymore.
No, you watch TV
So,
when you want, on the times that you want.
right. On the device that you want, on the subway, if you need to.
Yeah.
And so the going to the movies. I'm not surprised that it's become so fractured that people are like, oh yeah, my phone, because my phone is my world. How
Yeah.
they're not trained to, I mean, 90% of the movies I've ever gone to in my life, you didn't even have a phone.
Mm.
So I agree that I don't think people really know what they're doing or the degree to which they are being fractured or the experience is being fractured. But I do believe that because the subconscious mind is fundamentally healing, it seeks wholeness. That's what
Mm.
it seeks. Unless you're like a psychopath or something. I mean, you know what I mean? Like I think there are some exceptions to this, but I think your average normal
Yeah.
person seeks healing and seeks wholeness, and that we will find our way back on a completely different playing field for collective healing experiences, whether we do them, out in the desert for $750 for the weekend, or we, suddenly the Olympics become cool because everyone's watching, or whatever it is. That seeking of wholeness is not going to go away, no matter how strong our siloing becomes.
Do you think that hypnosis has kind of become like a dirty word in some ways? Like when you say it to the average person, they automatically go into, I have no control.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call it a dirty word. And I know I don't mean by dirty word, I mean
Yeah.
like a sex word, but I mean, I don't think there's like shame attached to it. I think there's fear attached to it. I think it's
Mm.
become a threatening, and not even become, it always has been. I mean, hypnosis
Yeah.
has always been a weird word. And when it's funny, when I've taught hypnosis for actors, mainly in Florida, is where I've done it through Lori Wyman, who I know you've had on this podcast. She's one of my dearest friends. Um, and she said, the name, it turns people off or whatever. And I would have so little patience for that. I'd be like, it's funny, in the hypnosis for actors class, I talk about coffee and how coffee can really like interfere with your ability to go into a very
Yeah.
deep trance and your ability to focus. And I was teaching the class once, and there was this guy, he was lovely. And he was like, all this stuff, it's really cool, but that coffee thing, like, that's never going to happen. I'm never going to give up coffee. And I said to him, oh, so Tom Hanks loses 50 pounds for Castaway, and Meryl Streep learns Polish for Sophie's Choice, but you're not going to give up coffee. Like, an actor should be constantly experimenting with this thing called life. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, our job is to explore what it is to be human. Our job is to experiment. And so I'm always disappointed when hypnosis scares an actor, because I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I would think an actor would go straight for this and be like, well, let's use hypnosis,
Yeah.
but the word itself has been cast as some like woo-woo scary word. And ironically, it's television, film, and theater that are to blame for that
Yeah. Well,
in
like,
large
why
part.
don't we call it what it really is in some ways, medicine?
Oh,
Is
interesting.
that's what Joe Dispenza, has been trying to say.
Interesting.
It's like his work, it's like, this is medicine. It's
Mm,
not this new thing. And it's like,
yeah.
why aren't we treating it like that instead of calling it this kabuki thing? When you say hypnosis to the average person, they're just like, they're
Yeah.
thinking like,
Yeah. And like, you are getting
no.
sleepy. I
Yeah.
know.
And then
I know.
they don't understand that. Like, this might be the thing that heals you and
Oh,
gets you
yeah.
out of what you like. I was going to wait a little bit, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about smoking. I mean, this is what took that away from you. You were smoking 2 packs a day.
Mhm. Yeah.
What, what was it? I'm curious though. You didn't say this in the book. What led to smoke? Because you said your mother smoked 3 packs a day. Was that
Yeah.
just kind of been indoctrinated, or was it like it was cool? Like what was it?
You mean, why did I smoke in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. What like led that?
I mean, I think I grew up in a household that wasn't particularly balanced,
Mm,
meaning, it was it would have been no surprise for anyone in my family or extended family to experiment with alcohol early, to, you know what I mean? That was just like,
yeah.
well, we weren't like Mormons. Um, I mean, with all respect to the Mormons, which I do respect, because the Mormons don't drink coffee. They
I
like,
know.
yeah. And in fact, did you know that in drug testing, sometimes they use Mormon pee as the control because Mormon pee has so little intoxicants,
Stimulants,
so
yeah.
few toxicants.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think it was the time as well. I mean, when I was 14, when I started smoking, that was 1980, and smoking was still cool.
Yeah.
It was still cool. Yeah, I mean, you could smoke on the London Underground, you could smoke on an airplane, you could smoke in the last 10 seats of a movie theater, you
Yeah.
could smoke every single restaurant. So it was just like, are you going to be a cool kid and do this like dangerous thing that we know is bad for you or not? And my
Yeah.
mother did it. So the problem with nicotine is that it's pretty addictive. I mean, look at all the vaping going on. And
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the new thing. It's like, oh, I don't smoke when I vape. And it's like, it's the same thing. You're just
I
switched on
mean,
to another
it's in the
substance.
same world of, it's the same process addiction. I mean, smoking
Mm,
is both nicotine and a process addiction, as is vaping. And you are
mm,
getting fewer, um, fewer, you're not inhaling smoke with a vape, but one could argue really easily that the lungs are not meant to be inhaling vapor.
yeah.
That's as weird to a lung as smoke. It's just a different kind of weird.
The scary thing though is that you'll find some people that are like 100 years old and they've smoked every day of their life and they've had no
Right.
problems. And then you'll
Right.
find somebody who smokes like 4 years and they're already got lung cancer. So it's like, what is the difference between the two? Is it a tolerance? Is it a mindset?
I mean, there's a lot of factors there, but the 100-year-old person, by definition, was born in 1922. And in
Mm,
1922, there was no industrialized agriculture. We weren't putting chemicals in the soil. And I mean, we were putting only organic fertilizer in the soil. And so what you had was an entirely different mineral structure. I mean, mineral content in the soil and in the food that that person ate, and specifically the food that that person's mother ate. So that person's mother, let's
mm,
say that person's mother was 25 when she had them, was born in 1897. In 1897, you're eating out of a garden that someone you know grows.
yeah.
And the fetus, and then you're with a mate who also grew up on food that clean and strong. And then you're with a mate and you create a baby, the constitution of that baby is going to be a shit ton stronger than the constitution of a child born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, or anywhere since. And anyone born from 1996 to today who as a fetus was introduced to, and then later as a child, the ridiculous amounts of glyphosate, otherwise known as Roundup, which is a pesticide that we put on genetically modified foods, i.e. soy and, what's the other one? Not wheat, soy and corn, which is in everything. Every single processed food in the world has soy and corn in it, basically.
That's what they
So
use.
since 1996 or 95, I can't remember, I think it's 6, we okayed GMOs. And what happened when we okayed GMOs was that the glyphosate spraying of the fields, because the genetic modification makes them pesticide tolerant, specifically glyphosate, the glyphosate levels went up like 2, 4, up to 12 times what they were earlier. So glyphosate and high fructose corn syrup, which was introduced in the 1970s, have been game changers in people's ability to absorb nutrients, and the nutrient profile of the foods is crappy anyway. So you
Mm,
have human beings that are getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So the person who's 100 years old who's still smoking was born in 1922. And by the way, all their peers are dead and they probably smoke too. So they're the outlier. Okay.
yeah.
They're probably, I
Yeah.
mean, they did a study of these 3 siblings. One was like a health food freak, one had martinis every day, and one was sort of in the middle. And they were all make crack through 100. So you're like, it's probably genetics. But there are a lot of factors going into when somebody manifests. I don't want to say manifests like they've asked for it, but when somebody experiences disease and the type of disease they experience,
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors, but that's just one of them. being when that person was born and the strength of their constitution naturally.
And
But
that seems to be something that a lot of people don't want to look at, is the fact that a lot of your choices, a lot of what has happened to you is based on those choices, instead of the way a lot of people look at it, which is, oh, there's nothing I can do. I just got sick. I just did this. It's
yeah.
like, no, there's a lot you can do.
Yes.
You chose
Yeah,
not to do.
absolutely.
No.
I mean,
And
without like shaming or blaming somebody after the fact, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, you
we
can't.
will all die and we will all die of something. So
Yeah,
no one gets out scot-free. But do you have more power than you think?
yeah,
Yes. But then it gets to the question of, a lot of people, myself included, for a long time felt sort of powerless over the choices that I made. So it was like all the
yeah.
information was there, but it's like, so why am I not choosing the celery over the candy bar? And it took
And
some years to navigate that until
and
I
that
was able to eat those foods.
and that seems to be the thing I see with procrastination with a lot of people, is that, like, they know they're not supposed to do it, but they still do it.
Right.
What is that? Is it, I mean, I think it's too convenient to just label it as laziness. It's got to be
Right.
something else that they can't,
Mhm.
like, what is it? And that's the thing that fascinates me, because I'm sure you've worked with hypnosis for actors, and then you find out that they didn't do any of the work. They just sat there and did it. And they're like,
Right.
well, I didn't have time. They didn't have this. It's like, but you're giving them something, you're giving them the gold, but
Right.
they don't want the gold. Is that something that is the culture, that, like, to destroy it, to mess it up?
Um, in my experience working with people, like, first of all, I say to my classes, we get what we want, but we're not in control of what we want. You can think you want to win an Oscar,
Yeah.
but take a snapshot of your life and you may not be doing what's required to win an Oscar.
Yeah.
You may think, I used to think I wanted to like live in a house in the Hamptons advertised in Vanity Fair,
Yeah.
but I didn't actually do what was required to get there. What I did realize as I meditated and ate good food and did hypnosis and revealed myself to myself and healed some of the fractures in me. Because when we feel fractured, when we've had injuries in our own subconscious mind, we can have one part of us moving in this direction and another part holding us back.
Mm.
Or we can have one part moving in this direction, another part moving in the complete opposite direction. It can be very, very frustrating. But hypnosis can actually bring the self back into an integrated whole. I mean, not a perfect whole. It's not like, but I used to say, before I did some really deep hypnotherapy, I would pull an arrow from my quiver, aim, and it would go like this, and it would end up hitting the target, but maybe on the edge of the bullseye, and the doing this meant binging my brains out, feeling really scared, procrastinating, like all sorts of resistance. And then I did some really good hypnosis that like rescued the part of me that was injured and integrate it back into my whole, so that my whole gas tank was working in one direction and I could pull an arrow out of my quiver, aim it, shoot, and hit the bullseye. And it wasn't
Yeah.
dramatic. It just, there's no freak out. There's no hysteria or, meltdown on the way. And I think we're wounded. Now, one of the issues with our culture lately, I have a friend who has some childhood wounds, and I've heard about them for ever since I've met the guy, and he's 60. And I mean, he's a lovely guy. He's one of my close friends, but there's this perpetual like, well, this is what happened to me as a child. And I just said to him the other day, I was like, you hanging out in this wound, continuing to acknowledge it, isn't healing it. Like, knowing about it and healing it are two different things. And I want you to know you can heal it. Like, people don't even know that. It feels like right now we're in a time where the message within the culture is, you're wounded, you're wounding, like, find your wound, sit with it, suck your thumb on it, and then have everyone around you adjust to your wounding.
Yeah,
That
that
is
is
so
exactly what's
backwards.
happening.
That's so backwards. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't identify our wounding, but wounding is healable. Now, does everyone understand hypnosis? I mean, hypnosis, by the way, is not the only way to do it, but it's a very effective way to do it.
Yeah.
But people don't even believe in healing. They're using, like, the wounding has become the king. And
Yeah.
I hope we move through this phase.
Yeah. No,
Wow.
but I think like hypnosis and meditation, these things can help get us away from that, because you have to confront yourself. Whereas there's nothing else that's really going to confront you, because like you can go sit in a movie theater, you can lie to yourself, you can go here, you can lie. You can't really lie to yourself in meditation or hypnosis. These
Very
things
well
come
said.
out.
It's very well said. And when we're in those spaces beyond the critical faculty, the subconscious mind perceives life as much more unified than the conscious mind. Conscious mind is
Yeah.
always judging and being like, me, us and them, and it's very dualistic. But the subconscious mind is connected to everyone and everything, and it aches, aches to heal you.
Yeah.
So, but you have to go down to those places where it's happening and let it happen. And sometimes you can't do that alone. I mean, meditation is a profoundly powerful process, but it can take a long time, and you're doing it basically alone. Nice thing about hypnosis is that the hypnotist kind of holds up the tent, and you and the hypnotist go in the tent together and do the work. Whereas meditation, you have to hold up the tent and be in it,
Mhm.
and then remember to hold it up again, and remember to hold it up again. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot. It can take a long
Interesting.
time.
Interesting. That's getting back to, so your whole character interview idea
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
comes in 2002. You were cast to play a kind of Alaska. What were you already experimenting with hypnosis and acting, and this was kind of just like the big one that hit, or like what was it about this?
I feel like I wasn't experimenting with hypnosis. I did get trained as a hypnotist until 1999, and I did a lot of smoking cessation and helping women give birth. And that was really my focus. Those were the places that I sort of developed some of my skills and my experience and my confidence. Confidence is a really big deal for a hypnotist. You don't want to be like, so if it's okay, you have to be able to lead somebody through an experience and really guide them with confidence. So I hadn't been focusing on acting. I'd been doing some of it myself, but it wasn't until that play that the sort of Venn diagram of hypnosis and acting overlapped. And it was because, as I say in the book, the role that I played in that particular Harold Pinter play was the sister of a woman who's been in a coma basically for like 27 years. And she fell into this weird illness when I was a child. And then she wakes up when I'm an adult, married to her doctor. And I was like, how do you research this role? Like,
Mm,
how do you know anyone who's been through this? No. Do you know anyone who's been in the coma? No. Do you? And I thought, what I had seen with my hypnosis clients is that when I took them into hypnosis, their level of recall and their level of detail was so precise and so clear. And it was so like when you and I just functioning right now from our conscious minds, if I say, hey, Justin, like, I want you to remember the playground at your elementary school, and you're going to have like
yeah.
bits and pieces sort of come to you, and then you'll come back to me. And then it's like, it was that which grade was that teacher? And then you come back to me. So it's, again, back to this word, like slightly fractured, to try and get to the subconscious material when you're functioning from the conscious mind. And I realized that as an actor, when I did research on a character, that's exactly what I was doing, was kind of going, ooh, how would she brush her teeth?
Yeah.
How would she walk?
Said,
And there was this,
you said the fingers crossed method.
yeah, it's like, I hope I'm figuring this out. I hope it's getting in deep. And there was no connectedness to it. But I noticed in my clients that they felt extremely connected, and there was this flow in their experience. So I called up a friend and said, I'll teach you how to take me into hypnosis, which is easy. And I want to have you ask me questions as this character and see if I develop through my imagination the details of the character without having to do like 1,000 little, oh, maybe. And sure enough, he took me from like the moment my sister fell into the coma to the moment that she woke up. And it took us a couple hours to like cover that terrain, but it was amazing.
Interesting.
It
And so
was
you
amazing.
so you recognized it immediately, like this is,
Yeah, this is huge, because I've been an actor since I was a kid, and I don't mean I was a professional all the time or anything, but like it was something I'd been doing and I'd had a lot of experience in it, and I was still sort of, I'd studied Stanislavski and I'd studied Meisner, and I'd been with an acting teacher that had a mishmash of techniques, and they all made sense, but I didn't have a tried and true like method of my
yeah,
own. And not that I need to keep it as my own, but when I saw that with hypnosis, you can go in the back door,
yeah,
I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And it's funny because I got to LA and I started taking acting class, and I love my teacher. He's fantastic. And you have like 3 or 4 weeks to work on a scene. And you're talking about laziness earlier, because I don't do the work either sometimes. And part of, yeah, well, there's reasons for that, but it would be like week 3 of the scene, and my teacher would be like, yeah.
yeah,
And then between week 3 and week 4, I would finally do the hypnosis. I'm like, okay. And I call up my scene partner and be like, let's do hypnosis with each other. And week 4, he'd be like, what happened? Like, why is this so different? Why is this completely like crystallized into an authentic thing? And I'd be like, well, we did the hypnosis. And he's like, fuck you. Why does it take you so long? Why do you waste my time with the first 3 weeks?
now because you've added in the hypnosis that I did from yours, the character, putting on the costume. Is that something that you used as like kind of a way of turning it off?
Yes, I wanted to have actors go into the hypnosis, go into this character room, go into a closet, take off the costume of, put on the costume of the character, and then begin the hypnosis, just as a ritual. The truth is, people sometimes are like, will I get stuck in hypnosis? Or, what if, and it's like, have you ever gotten stuck watching a TV show? Like really stuck, where you're like, I am unable to turn the channel. Have you ever gotten stuck in your dream life? Like where you fall asleep and like 4 days later, it's like, Justin's still asleep. He's stuck in his dream. We don't. We have access to and from the subconscious mind very easily. It's just, think
Yeah,
of it as your imagination. Like you can go in and out. But people were concerned enough about like, I'm playing a murderer. I don't, it's one thing to do this method with a murderer and be like,
yeah,
oh, maybe he had a shit childhood. And another thing to go into hypnosis as a murderer. And they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to like make a distinction between themselves and the character. So I wanted to make that
yeah.
clear. I don't think it's
Because
necessary, but I think it's helpful.
because I noticed, like, after I did Hamlet or whatever, like after I came out of it, I still felt like it was still kind of like lingering there. Like I was like, God, why do I feel like, I need to go avenge my father?
Well, it's good. You want that as an actor, because
Yeah,
we are slippery. An actor is psychologically slippery. I mean, You and I are saying to a writer, bring it on, make me a character, and I'll lose myself and slip into that. That's weird. Now,
Yeah.
it's not weird when a child does it. And all it is, it's play that we're taking into our adult lives. But as an actor, I don't want to leave rehearsal and just completely shut down and not have the character live in me somewhere. But the point is, I've played a lot of characters and not ever started living their lives.
Yeah.
Like been like, oh, that play's over. Now I'm gonna be Lady Macbeth, for the rest of my life.
I'm gonna go be a cup of carpenter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where is she? She's building a house.
Right. It took over. It never ended. Like Meryl Streep just suddenly is like, oh no, she turned into Nora Ephron, and now she's living Nora Ephron's life.
Just a French lieutenant's.
Right. She's out on that pier with the thing.
She's still there.
The hood.
Like, it's over. You need to leave.
I mean, I guess there are situations where people go into things and they do experience like a certain psychosis, but I would say that is something that they're prone to having happen anyway.
Yeah.
The acting itself, the role itself doesn't make that happen.
Yeah. I mean, you're kind of talking about Day-Lewis when it would be very hard for him to drop it, because he wanted to stay in all the time. But it made it harder for him to do as many roles. He had to take like almost 4 years in between a role because it was so
interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was that deep.
Like it was like three years of work on Daniel Plainview, and then like it takes like a whole another year and a half to kind of get rid of it.
There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, There Will Be Blood.
That's like my favorite movie. That's
like
one of my top 5 movies.
I love that movie.
So amazing. But he should use hypnosis. That's
I know.
the thing.
He should.
Like, he's taking himself into a trance. It's like, I would love to give him the tools to like do it succinctly and effectively, and then take himself out succinctly and effectively. Because he may be in the category of people who need that, like, imagine the costume coming on and off. Like, you have your psyche, it has theirs. You're slipping it on.
But that's kind of what happened with Shia LaBeouf. He tried to, be a method actor, but then he was like, okay, my character needs to be cut, so I'm going to cut myself. And I'm like, all right, now you're going into insanity.
Yeah, and it's like not in a way. It's I think it's funny. There's a story about Dustin Hoffman working with Laurence Olivier, and he says, "Why don't you try acting?" There is sometimes this lack of maybe understanding of how powerful the imagination is. But once you do the hypnosis to get into character, you see the limitless expanse of the imagination, and that you can go anywhere, do anything, and feel anything that you want to. And I think for method actors, sometimes
that's what they're after.
Don't trust that as much. You know what I mean? And so they think like, no, I have to do it. And I have to like slip so fully into this thing. It's like, well, okay. I mean,
there's De Niro, he had somebody ruin his teeth to do Cape Fear and then fix them back. And it's like, okay.
Which actor did that? Which Cape Fear actor?
Robert De Niro, when he went and did that. Yeah, he had somebody like come and like completely mess up his teeth, and then he paid another like $5,000 to get them all fixed. And it's just like, what if he said to you, I can't really fix that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have
I knew how to do it.
Like the Christian Bales and the Al Pacinos and they're brilliant and they're amazing. But I don't think Meryl Streep's a method actor. I think she knows how to take it on and off, and she's the greatest of all. She's like the GOAT for women for me. And I just think there's a number of approaches, but I'm a full believer that you can be a healthy human being and a great artist at the same time. I do not think we need to dine off our wounds for the rest of our lives. I really don't.
That's what I like about James McAvoy. He says, people are like, were you so like nervous about, playing, 36 characters and Split? And he's like,
no, it's, I know a lot of actors try to say that like it was all this pain and everything, but I'm enjoying it and I'm doing it. And I was like, finally, an actor who actually, tells the truth. Is there are some actors that will indulge in that, and just to make it so, because it's a great story to tell. It's like, oh wow, he went
Well,
through
and our
this.
wounds have a lot of energy in them. Our wounds have a lot of energy, and we're
Yeah.
attracted to them. So if we're not going to heal from them, maybe we should use them to our benefit. I mean, it makes sense that the catharsis of
Yeah.
intuitively trying to heal yourself by playing a character, great, go for it. But I'd
What
much
you don't
rather
have
be,
that.
well, and you don't, or you can heal from it and still be a good actor. But
Exactly.
at the same time, without the wound, you may not be driven to win the Oscar. Like sometimes you get what you
Yeah.
want is based on a wound driving you to say like, see me, see me, see me. Your parents didn't see you. Your parents, were shit. It's like you want the world to compensate for that. The problem is you get it and it doesn't heal the wound.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the Hoffman, mentioned Meryl Streep, Kramer versus Kramer. I mean, he was going through a divorce at the time, and he's basically taking it all out on Meryl
Right.
Streep and
Right.
just being, rude. It's like, does it? Do you have to go to this level? I mean, like, what do you
Right.
do when you don't have that? Because
Right.
like there's when technique comes in.
Right.
How do you do it without that? I mean, that's almost, to me, it's almost like saying I want to be, going in and playing a drunk and going out and getting wasted and
Yeah.
showing up on set and being like, all right, let's do the scene. It's
I
like,
mean,
that's
again,
not,
like to each his own. I mean, Mickey Rourke,
yeah,
would do that, and
yeah,
I just think it's unsustainable,
that's the
and
thing.
not necessary. But we are slippery,
Yeah.
and there's really
There's
no
no
rules here.
simple answer.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
there's
just
no
saying,
simple
I guess
answer.
what I want to drive home to actors is like, your imagination is really like, you have no idea until you've explored it in hypnosis, like what you're dealing with.
And
And
that's one of the things I noticed when, I listened to the recording, but, as you're going into like marriage and stuff, it's like, him didn't do that. So I almost like started just like kind of almost, because I know the story, going through it. And have you had that with actors? Like they're listening to the recording and like, they're kind of using it as a guide. It's almost timing them in some ways, this will be done when it's over, but
right.
not actually following your voice. It's just kind of getting me started. Like I like the induction, and then it's like it kind of just takes
I don't
off
know.
on its
I mean,
own.
I've never heard that before, but I don't necessarily talk to people that much about using the recording itself. I love what you're saying, which is you let the recording take you to the most pertinent, the final
Yeah.
pertinent place. And then with whatever's left, you just went for it in terms of, were
Yeah.
you
Well,
thinking like Hamlet thoughts and thinking Hamlet situations?
I mean, I was like I'm using like the 5 years old and the 10 years old and the 15-year-old as almost like benchmarks of when to move on. But I'm kind of not like going with the specifics, because it's like he doesn't have a job, it's like,
Yeah,
so it's like,
yeah,
what is
yeah.
he doing all day? It's like, I'm sure he's looking at, a lake. And I started
Right.
thinking about, Claudius, I imagine he probably didn't even let him see, like, why would he even let anyone see the body of, his father? Because it's like, you would see that he was there. So it's like, yeah, he's not, you're not going to see the body ever again. It's like that like, well, he's
Interesting.
hiding something, what is he hiding? Like, I imagine even as the play begins that he's still like, this guy, what? My father's dead. My mother's now marrying him. My mother won't speak to me. I'm pretty much being, downgraded. It's like, I imagine these situations where you'd be like, well, I'm going to be king one day. And Claudius being like, yes, maybe, something like that, where he's like holding him. So all this stuff was coming to me as I was going through your recording.
I love what you're saying. I mean, it makes me so happy because that's exactly has been my experience when I did like, I played Macbeth once, the guy himself.
Yeah, you talked about, yeah.
And, I had massive insights into that. And it's the play with which I am most familiar of Shakespeare's canon. Like I've worked on it several times in different ways. And I had an insight that I'd never had before in any other, and
Yeah.
I just want to say it right now because people watching might be like, oh yeah, what is that? Where Lady
Yeah.
Macbeth says, I have given suck and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. And then she says, but if I'd promised like you had
Yeah.
to smash its brains out, I would. But she's saying that she has nursed a child.
Yeah.
So where's this child?
Exactly.
It's not in
It's
the
almost
home.
like they left all this stuff in there. It's like, well, what
Yeah,
happened before that?
like
If you just
clues.
start with, yeah.
And suddenly, as Macbeth, because that came to me in hypnosis when I was doing hypnosis for being Macbeth, when that came to me, I was like, oh, now I could kill somebody.
Because you
Like
felt child, the
the
loss of a
loss of a
child.
child.
And it's
Like
like, that's,
now I could, if you add the witches and my wife and that darkness in my soul from having lost a child, because Duncan
yeah.
has children.
Yeah.
I mean, Macbeth wouldn't do it in his normal waking state, but you add the witches to it, bang, like it was there to be done. But before that, I couldn't
Yeah.
find it. It just seems
Yeah.
so like, this is a good guy. How can we turn him
Yeah.
into a murderer? But with that line, I could turn him into a murderer. And I'd never, ever, ever, I had played Lady Macbeth
Yeah.
and no director had ever said, what are you talking about? The guy I've given suck. Where is that kid? No one had asked that question. It just
I
gets
know.
done. The monologue just gets done.
Well, that's the problem, I think, with Shakespeare is like a definitive version arises and nobody else tries to, change that idea of it. It's very hard. Like we kind of know what Hamlet is. We know what it's like. How do you get away from, how do you come at it from a new perspective? And I think that's where hypnosis can come in, because you're not, oh, I'm watching what they did. Or even if you're not even watching, it's just almost in the ether. You
Yeah,
kind of, you
absolutely.
know, an idea of,
Well, and that's what I'm saying. But I love how you just described your experience of the hypnosis, because you described it from being in it, and you started to say, and Claudius is saying this, and I'm not talking to my mother, and she's not talking to me. And blah, blah,
That's a
blah.
good point. Yeah, I
And
did say that.
that's, I mean, this is what I mean by the crossing fingers method is Jessica trying to jam Macbeth into
Yeah.
her. But with
Yeah, I'm
hypnosis,
gonna go sit in a closet and be like, okay, I am Macbeth. I am Macbeth. I
yeah.
am Macbeth. And now
And
come
every
out, and
time you
then
say that, you're trying to bypass your own critical faculty, and you can't.
it's like, yeah,
If you go through a hypnotic trance, the critical faculty isn't even there. And it starts with the I. It's like, I'm 5 years old, I'm 10 years old, I'm 15 years old. And you were demonstrating that right now, and demonstrating these amazing insights that people have.
yeah.
Amazing insights. Like, yeah. I mean, I
I could
think
see the
my,
house that, I could see, outside these places I've never been, a father I've never seen before. It's like,
and they're
I,
clear.
I don't know if it's influences. I've been watching House of the Dragon, but who knows? It's
Yeah.
just, but it's like so, yeah. It was quite astounding, and when I did it today, it just kind of reinforced it even more. And I was like, okay. But then after I came out of it today, it didn't feel like it lingered as much, because it wasn't as new. So I was like, okay, I can only go back to that. But now, whereas yesterday I was like, okay, I need to, do something to get this out of me.
Well, and the nice thing though, I mean, sometimes the not lingering is just that it's getting sort of set in you. Like
Yeah.
if you were to walk on stage right now as Hamlet, you wouldn't sit there and go on some deep subconscious level, like, I gotta be Hamlet. Like it's
Yeah.
in. And you just would come on and you'd be in it, and that would make us be in it. Because the actor is in a hypnotic trance. To pretend to be another person is almost by definition being in a hypnotic trance. And the deeper the trance that the actor is in, and it's not woo-woo, it's just the
Yeah.
deeper you are in that character, the deeper the trance of the audience member. You are inducing them into a trance.
Which is why it's so amazing, because it's like you mentioned it in the book. We're already doing this. We just don't even realize it. When you watch a movie, you're
you're in a form of hypnosis. If I stare at this object and I put my eyes, together there, I'm in some form of trance.
Right.
It's another hypnotic
It's a perfectly
advertising.
natural state of mind. We go in and out of it all the time. And
Yeah.
we've developed an entertainment industry to exercise it.
Yeah.
And,
Better
and I
than
mean
really.
exercise like this, not exorcise. But what people don't know is that that state of mind, if you use it to help yourself, is deeply, deeply healing, if you go there therapeutically.
One thing I know, can you create, because you talk about, the induction, can you create triggers to get there faster?
Yeah, absolutely. They used to think that hypnosis required like this 20 minutes basically of
Yeah.
what we call progressive relaxation, and that was the way. And then this guy came along in the 1950s named Dave Ellman, and he was like, I don't think we need that. I just think we need bypass of the critical faculty after bypass of the critical faculty. He developed an induction that was like 3 minutes, and it took people boom.
Yeah.
So if you decide, generally in hypnosis, it's difficult to do just from your waking state with a cup of coffee in you. But if you decide from a relaxed place that every time you pick up this coffee cup, you'll relax, and you decide that, and you want it, and you practice it, then yeah, I mean, those are what we call hypnotic anchors.
Yeah.
So
it's like you can put the fingers together. That's a common one that a
yes,
lot of people use. It's like, okay, every time you do this, you're gonna perk up, something
right.
like that.
Well, and it's part of, as we as actors, let's say you're doing something in a theater, the deepening of the hypnosis that occurs when you start getting your costumes made, and then you do a tech rehearsal, and then suddenly the lights are on you, and then suddenly you're in your costumes and your makeup and your hair is done. That brings you in. So by the time you're in the play, all it takes is putting on your costume, and your subconscious mind is like rearranging itself. So these triggers that you're saying are happening naturally too.
Which you talk about with the lines. I think a form of induction is also, when you have the lines memorized or you don't have them memorized and you're learning blocking and cues, that's almost forming an induction to know the lines because you're moving.
Yeah, and you're right. If you like, there's one thing me looking at a page learning my lines, there's another thing running them with you in a scene.
Yeah.
So I remember when I see your beard that you're a dirty pig.
All right, that's it.
No, I don't really mean that.
I'm going to shave now.
I mean, as the character,
Yeah.
if I'm angry at you and the line is you're a dirty pig, I'm going to associate that with something about you. So the next time I see you, it's much, much easier to think it. Because we don't just learn with our brains, we learn with our whole being.
I think that was, I don't know if you saw the Michael Jordan documentary that they did on that. Yeah, where he's talking about how somebody would just say, "Good job, pal." And he would just take that as like a slight and use that as motivation to destroy this person. It's almost like he's putting himself in a hypnotic state of like, how dare he disrespect me, even though he didn't do anything. It's almost kind of scary for I to even say. It's like, "How's a good day?" He could go off and like think that like, how dare he task me the day?
It is funny.
I took offense to that.
Again, in our culture, the word trigger has become such common parlance that people are like, "Oh, that triggers me. That triggers me." And that's exactly what they're describing, is that something causes them to reverberate deeply in their own selves uncomfortably. And I do stand up and I'll be like, one of my lines is, "You know what triggers me? The word trigger. Like, use your words." You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck are you saying when you say that triggers me? Because we need to take more responsibility than like, "Ooh, that triggers me." It's like, well, go in. What exactly is happening? Because if it's reminding you of being beaten up, like, let's get you some help and not, again, like rearrange your entire environment to never feel it.
But I think that's the thing that he used as motivation for Jordan to get him up to do all
Yes.
this stuff was
Yes.
his
Yes.
family life. His father would put the kids against each other. So it was always competition. And I think he just continued to use that
Well, and like we were
and
saying
build
about
it up in
actors,
his head.
our wounds drive us. Our
Yeah.
wounds are there's a lot of fuel in there. A lot of fuel in there.
And that's why I think he was tired. Like when he, he's like, I can't wait to quit. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure you can't wait to quit because you have to compete with every single person and
Right.
create things in your mind to
Yeah.
go out and perform.
To be pissed. Yeah.
Yeah, to just be angry. And it's like we've seen that with Day-Lewis. It's like you can only do that for so long before the body just says, we can't do this anymore. This is like it's almost like a drug addict continuing to pump more and more. And it's like you're gonna reach that wall where it's just like, we gotta
It's
stop.
interesting you should say this because I'm working on a book with an athlete named Dotsie Bausch, and she won a silver medal in the 2012 Olympics in track cycling. She was desperately and almost fatally anorexic in her early 20s, and she healed from the anorexia at 26. She'd never ridden a bike. She started cycling at 26 and made the national team in like a few months. I mean, she just, but she wasn't, I mean, I guess she was fueled by her wounds in some ways. But the point is, she made it to the Olympics at 39, vegan, like older than anyone competing, and experienced the Olympics in almost a Zen state because she'd healed so much. And her athleticism was no longer attached, and really never had been, because I don't know, she was always naturally an athletic person, but cycling had never been attached to her wounds. She'd done it a completely different way. And she talks about Olympians sometimes, like after the Olympics, being so depressed, and that silver medalists specifically are the most unhappy people in the world because, they've had this goal. She never even had the goal of going to the Olympics. That was like never a thing.
Yeah.
They've had this goal. Their wounds have driven them, not everyone, obviously, but many people, like some sort of desire to be seen or be known or be important or be special, and then drives them there. The day comes and goes. And like, what do you have? Like, you're probably not in your body except as an athlete, and no one really cares. I don't mean, it's no one's paying attention. It's very, very difficult. So interesting what you're saying.
It's like, what does she do to move on with life? She's like, I gave all this, and it's like, now what do I do?
I mean, luckily she did have, she was an adult at that point, 20 years older than a lot of the other athletes. And she was fully in her body, and she knew exactly who she was. So moving on for the Olympics was not that big a deal. But
I mean, look at the Simone Biles girl who, couldn't do it. And everybody's just like, how dare she do it? It's like, you have no idea what she's going through, Yeah. She may have just hit that wall and be like, what am I doing? I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to stop. And they're just like, no, you have to,
Right. This is who you are, which is like a very limiting thing to say to somebody.
Yeah.
That about does it. I want to thank my guest, Jessica Porter. I suggest you check out her book, Unlock Your Power, a guide to self-hypnosis for actors. Also, if you're having trouble sleeping, go to Sleepwave. As always, you can find me at Justin Yance. And remember, this is only the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. And I will see you next time on the DMF